It was one of the deadliest Palestinian suicide attacks in years. The target, a Jerusalem bus full of ultra-Orthodox Jews returning from the Wailing Wall. The bomber stood in the middle of the articulated bus and blew himself up with a very big bomb.
I watched on August 8, 2003, news footage of a bomb blast in the city of Jerusalem. Killed in that attack, men, women, and children. I had seen many stories of suicide bombers in the recent months, as have many of us. But this one seemed to affect me much more. Those children. What could cause a human being to commit such horror? Was this evil done by a religion or just a madman? And if so, what was causing so many people to lose their mind and decide that suicide and mass murder was the best solution for them? I could not answer those questions because I realized that I didn't know very much about the other side. All I knew was what I saw on CNN. But that always seemed like a sanitized version of what someone wanted me to see. I wanted to find out for myself. I needed to find out for myself. My name is Kinsey Beck. I am a Christian, I'm an American, and the son of a Jew on my father's side. Armed with a tourist visa, I left my country with the intent of forming an opinion that I, at the time, hadn't the information to make. This is what I saw during my time in the Middle East. Although the city is divided into 4 quarters, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, and Armenian, people live and move about each other with no apparent friction. And every faith has their own part of the city, in some cases, one right on top of the other. Above the marketplace, it seems like a different city entirely. A Jewish community 15 feet above the Muslim quarter. The Jewish quarter is noticeably cleaner and free of trucks that negotiate the Muslim quarter with great regularity. But it doesn't take long to figure out that when the trucks come, you simply move out of their way. But no matter where I was, it was never hard to figure out which section of the city I was in. I checked into the Tabasco Tea House, a hostel in the Muslim quarter that I would use as a base camp for the remainder of my trip. It is nestled in the heart of Old Jerusalem and had all the amenities one could ask for, communal bathrooms notwithstanding. Staying in the Muslim quarter, I would venture out each day with the hope of learning as much as I could about what would cause such evil to surface in this place.
Thank you. So my name is Aka. Since the Intifada until now, hard life, the occupation, difficult life, no hope in the future, checkpoint. There is a lot of difficult things. I don't know how to explain for you very well, but if you live here and if you live here and if you see by your eyes how the people they live here, you will understand what's going on exactly. our problem that all the world, they watch the CNN, they watch the Israeli TV. So they don't know exactly what's going on in Jerusalem, in West Bank, in Gaza, in refugees camp. This is in Nablus, in refugees camp, they call him Balata. So this is an Israeli soldier, and there is inside family. You see, they destroyed this house because they've been looking, I don't know, for people. They call them terrorist people, I don't know what.
What do you think about the bombings? The bus bombing last week?
Okay, someone, he go and he kill himself and he kill civilian people. So why this guy is doing like this? Why all the world, they don't ask themselves, why these people, they are doing like this? Why?
What do you think the Israeli government could do to end the bombings?
If the Israeli government, they need to stop all of these things and the violent and the terrible things and the bomb. And first of all, they must do negotiation for all the people, you know, I mean the Palestinian, the Israeli government, Hamas, Jihad, all of these groups. Okay, because you know everyone he been doing mistakes. I mean the Israeli government, they've been doing mistakes, and the Palestinians, they've been doing mistakes. So they must sit and do negotiation together and to end all of these things.
I talked with Akka for a while longer. I asked him if it was possible to go into Gaza to see the things he spoke of. He said it was too dangerous, but offered to take me inside the West Bank as my guide the following day. Although he was the first person I interviewed, I had no reason not to trust him, so I agreed. I went back to the Tabasco to settle in for the night. From the roof of the hostel, I watched children playing and having fun at their rooftop school next door. I thought back to my early days on the playground and how different their lives are from mine. What must it be like to grow up in this city? Such an old city with such an amazing history. At night, the city seemed to take on a whole new personality. Silent are the streets. The once bustling shops are all closed down, leaving no sign that mere hours ago this was a busy marketplace. Even at night, the presence of religion stands out, never letting me forget exactly where I am.
In the Middle East, they think differently here. It's not like America. There's a lot of heat down here. No matter what compromise we can give them or what they can offer us, both sides are going to feel bad about it. So I don't think the only thing that can be done really is politically, but they're not really willing to come to the political table. And even though we are superior, militarily wise, so they have to resort to tactics that basically to scare the people. But that doesn't scare. All that does is make anger and make hurt feelings, which means one party's not going to come to the table if the other party's going to be doing tactics just that's going to undermine the whole situation.
I woke early that morning and felt surprisingly rested, considering I only slept about 4 hours. I left the 700-year-old hostel and met Akka just as he was setting up his shop for the day. He said we had to wait for his boss to arrive before we could depart, so I helped him set up shop as we talked and got to know one another.
What are those cameras for?
In every part in Jerusalem there is cameras. Look, everything in this land, it's security, you know. يلا ولا امشي.
His shop was positioned next to the Jewish quarter, delineated by the gates he said remained open unless situations of unrest arose, in which case they would be locked, keeping people out. After about an hour, his boss arrived and we departed for Ramallah. Outside the Damascus gate, we boarded a van that would take us to the West Bank checkpoint. Aka told me that I would have to cross the checkpoint by myself, or else the presence of an American traveling with a Muslim would draw too much attention and we would most likely be detained by the military. Aka would go through the checkpoint first, and I would follow a few minutes after. He told me if asked, I should tell the soldiers I was visiting family in Ramallah. I had no idea how this would be plausible, but luckily for me, I went through without incident and met Aka on the other side. "100 yards past the checkpoint, I saw the highly contested wall that was being built around the West Bank. Aka was nervous about me taking my camera out so close to the checkpoint, but I felt compelled to capture how massive the construction project was. The huge earth movers were cutting a groove out of the hillside at least 150 feet wide.
The Bush administration is withholding some loan guarantees to Israel because of Jewish settlements in the occupied territories. The administration is delaying a separate decision on withholding even more of the assistance because of the barrier Israel is building to separate those Jewish communities from Palestinian communities in the West Bank.
Well, the U.S. has objected to a security wall that Israel is building in the West Bank, but that didn't stop it from vetoing a UN Security Council resolution condemning the barrier. U.S. Ambassador John Negroponte says that the Arab-backed resolution was very unbalanced and didn't condemn recent terrorist attacks against Israel. The U.S. was the only country to vote against the measure.
Back at the checkpoint, what you are seeing is actually a temporary wall put in place until the main wall is built, at a cost of over $1 billion. Everywhere I looked, I saw trash, raw sewage, and dilapidated structures. The temperature was over 100 degrees, and the only relief I could find was popsicles being sold by two boys that stood in the median of the road. Most of the shops near the border were closed. There were remnants of fires everywhere, some old, some new, and some still smoldering. None of the buildings seemed to be sealed from the elements. After we caught a taxi and went towards the city of Ramallah, within 5 minutes, we approached what looked like an old, torn-down mall. As we got closer, I realized I had seen this place on CNN many times. Aka turned to me and said, "This is where Arafat lives." As we drove around the very large compound, I asked if there was any way to get a better view inside. Aka turned to me and said, "Hold on." We pulled up to the main gate. I thought we would stop so I could get a better view, but instead, without hesitation, we drove straight through the gate, which promptly closed behind us. I was only slightly concerned since Aka hadn't told me we would be going inside.
By week's end, the noise of war had drowned out any talk of peace. Israeli armored bulldozers punched holes in the walls of Yasser Arafat's compound in the Palestinian town of Ramallah, and tanks rolled through the streets.
When we drove in, 2 guards with machine guns quickly met us as we got out of the taxi. They spoke to Akka in Arabic for quite some time. One guard was talking to Akka, the other was keeping his eye on me, and I was keeping my eye on the machine gun being held by the 3rd guard who just walked up to my left. I couldn't tell what they were saying to each other, but it sounded like Akka was trying to convince them of something. As it turned out, my momentary concerns were, of course, unnecessary. Akka turned to me and said, "Okay, they're going to let us film for a short while." He told them I was an American journalist and that I wanted to take pictures for a story I was doing. I was very impressed with Akka for getting us in the compound, even though he didn't tell me this was his plan ahead of time, which seemed to start a trend with my new friend, a trend that will come into play later in my story. One thing that Akka stressed to me was that I under no circumstances was to film the part of the compound that Arafat actually lives in. This place right here. I guess both Akka and I have areas of communication that need work. The compound is actually called a muqata. Every Palestinian city has a muqata. It's like the equivalent to the military headquarters, police station, jail, and courthouse all in one. After about 10 minutes, a soldier in the Palestinian Authority came out and agreed to give us a personal tour of the entire compound.
Can you visualize living here in peace? Is it possible? Can you see that in your mind?
تفكر انك تعيش بسلام؟ في امل عندك تعيش بسلام؟
إذا توفر لي الأمن بعيش بسلام. من 50 سنة.
Since 50 years until now.
فلسطين راحت شبر شبر.
Yeah.
بنفس المنظر اللي أنت شايفه، يعني كل قرية وبيت فلسطيني راح من الفلسطينيين بنفس الواقع هذا. كله بالنهاية المدن بتصير بمسحوها وبتصير أرض وفيش حضارة فلسطينية. بيجي بقول لك فلسطين أرض بلا شعب. هذه حقيقة مغلوطة.
Other than Arafat's personal building, I had unfettered access to the compound. The soldier told me that the majority of the buildings that were destroyed by the Israeli government were not actually part of the Palestinian military. He said they were the social services building, the jail, the courthouse, and the buildings for the people. He proposed the question that if the Israeli government was attacking Arafat, why did they destroy all the buildings that were for the Palestinian people? I believe that is a valid question, and furthermore, if the Israeli government is punishing Arafat for not trying hard enough to stop the bombings, how can they expect Arafat or anyone from the Palestinian government to have any effect on the bombings when they have no government facilities left standing?
كل الجندي الإسرائيلي يوم
كم سنة كنت بالسجن أنت؟
12 سنة.
He stayed in the jail for 12 years.
He was in jail?
Yeah.
For what?
ليش?
تهم باطلة من إسرائيل.
He don't do anything, just they pick him.
كل انسجنت وأنا بالمدرسة عمري 15 سنة.
He been 15 years old when they come in the jail.
أجوا أخذوني من الصف هيك بلغوا.
The soldier they take him from
school.
Did they give him a reason?
أعطوك سبب؟
قدموا تهم بس ما لهاش علاقة.
No special reason.
إذا توفر الأمن والأمان وإذا أمريكا بتأجل على ديمقراطية تتفضل تشوف الشعب الفلسطيني والشارع الفلسطيني والظلم الإسرائيلي اللي دخل كل بيت فلسطيني.
Although it was obvious that Palestinians live in less than desirable conditions, I had yet to see anything that substantiated his claims that the Israeli injustice has entered every Palestinian home. One thing was certain, The destruction of this complex was massive and complete. I thanked the soldier for his permission to roam freely around the complex, and we left for downtown Ramallah, 1/2 mile away.
بديت انازع من الجرب عشاني سامع كيف المرض قاعد بقرب على شعبي سو بدافع عن العرب طريق المعي مسكني ميكروفون وبتشوف كيف نلبق لبعض اكتر صاروا زي البس لما يخاف من المي يمكن بشوخ بس تنساش اني اوريجينال والمخ كريمينال بضل تعدى بضل طوخ من ما قال الليركس غلط هي ودخل الراب كمان بين في اللي فهموا المعنى في اللي
Downtown Ramallah seemed to have a much better quality of life than what I saw near the border. Gone were the piles of trash and puddles of raw sewage. And I did feel good that at least some American influences had taken hold.
فيش حياة شافكم متعودين في خوف يمين وجا كتبوا من اليمين للشمال فاهمين الدالة الألف للإم إي آر الصار تامر النفار الراب ستار شافكم متعودين على من شمال
When the soldier said his land is being taken away, I can only assume he is talking about this. This is one of the main settlement complexes near Ramallah. Complete with a hospital, marketplace, and schools, it is entirely independent from the neighboring city of Ramallah. A 50-foot wall surrounds the city within a city. To be a settler, you must first be a Jew living in a foreign country. Then you apply for citizenship, and if accepted, the Israeli government gives you land in a settlement community, all costs paid for by the Israeli government. Having made our way back across the West Bank checkpoint, we boarded a van returning to the old city of Jerusalem. On the way back, we passed through a Palestinian village where I got my first look at what suburban life is like for the Palestinian. Just outside the city limits of Jerusalem, we approached another checkpoint. There were 2 lanes going our direction towards Jerusalem. There was our lane, a 15-minute wait, and a second lane where cars simply slowed down to about 10 miles an hour as they were waved through. I don't know why the cars in our lane were being stopped. We weren't searched or asked questions. I asked Akka why they made us wait. He said the other lane was reserved for Israeli citizens only.
Fact is that history has shown that whenever Israel does offer concessions, and they have in the past, such like with Oslo, that it just leads to renewed violence. And if they did get the West Bank and Gaza, if you look at the map, the fact if they can get it strategically and keep it as their own, I think that they're just going to use that as an advantage to strike against Israel. Because as far as peace is concerned, I don't really see a partner for peace.
What do you think about what they say that the settlers are taking up their land?
They say this. We say that it's our country because the Bible, you know, this kind of thing. They have argument, we have argument. God knows who's right.
One day after 2 deadly bombings in Israel, Israeli jets struck and destroyed the home of a senior Hamas leader in Gaza City. Palestinian hospital officials say Mahmoud Zahar was slightly wounded. His bodyguard and eldest son were killed in the attack. At least 20 others were wounded, including Zahar's wife and daughter.
I left for the Gaza Strip early, just as the sun was rising. I didn't know what my chances were of gaining access into Gaza, but either way, the driver I hired would drop me off near the border and I would be on my own from there. It was a 90-minute drive, and the closer we got, the more nervous I became. The night before, Aka introduced me to a friend of his named Khaled, who seemed to know a lot about what was going on in the Middle East as well as the world. We met at a diner in the old city, and we talked for a couple of hours. He asked me a lot of questions about myself, why I was here, and what I planned to accomplish. I felt as though I was being interviewed. He was surveying me like a contractor surveys a would-be construction site to see if it is suitable for building. I told him I was trying to remain objective, and he laughed. After a while, he told me to meet him 2 hours later at a different restaurant, and he would try to find the best way for me to get into Gaza. Eagerly, I waited close by and was 30 minutes early to our next meeting place. Khaled was already there waiting for me. He told me he learned that 2 men, a French doctor and an Austrian journalist, were also planning on going to Gaza early that next morning. He said he could arrange to have me ride with them so that I might have a better chance of getting into Gaza as a group. But I declined. I felt that trying to talk the guards into letting me enter by myself would be much easier than trying to talk the guards into letting the 3 of us enter as a group. Khaled told me what time the 2 travelers were planning on leaving, so I arranged to get myself at the Gaza border 2 hours earlier than that. So I checked out of my hostel, not knowing when I would be back, and set out for Gaza. We finally arrived 1/2 mile from the border. My driver was nervous when he stopped the car. "This is as far as I go," he said. I said goodbye and started walking towards the border. I knew it was a crime to photograph military facilities, so I kept my camera in my bag. I had been there trying to talk my way across for 2 hours when the French doctor and Austrian journalist arrived. To make a very long story short, none of us were allowed to enter. I found myself with the French doctor, who I affectionately called Frenchie, and the Austrian journalist, whose voice sounded like a shameless Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonation. We were ordered to leave immediately by the military. Frenchie said he was going to stay and make one more attempt to gain access. I thought that was odd, but nevertheless, I bid the doctor good luck, and the Austrian and I began to walk back across the desert. With my last great act of defeat, I attempted to snap off a shot of where I had spent the last 4 hours. The facility was enormous, a border capable of 35,000 cars a day, yet while I was there, I could count all the cars that passed through on one hand. My new friend and I left the border of Gaza around 11 a.m. Just 15 minutes into the walk, and the temperature had already reached 100 degrees and was climbing. 2 hours later, we had made it 10 miles to a lone gas station. We replenished our water and calculated that at this rate, it would take us 2 days to get back to Jerusalem. We needed to pick up the pace. As we left the gas station, to our amazement, we ran into none other than Frenchie. He didn't have a drop of sweat on him. I asked him how he got there, but his already broken English seemed to have worsened since I saw him last. Nevertheless, the 3 of us set off down the road together.
Chante la romance de l'amour qu'on oublie, c'est une valse brune.
Our spirits were high as we tried to make the best of our situation. We were like 3 peas in a pod. We were having absolutely no luck trying to get a ride. The extended thumb, a staple of American hitchhikers, seemed to mean in Israel, "Please laugh at me as you drive by." After a while, it became obvious that we would not get a ride with the 3 of us standing there together. We would have to separate. We would put 1 mile of distance between each of us with better hopes of someone picking one of us up. The only problem is that we all wanted to be last in line, hence the first person that cars would pass. But before we could decide, or before I could even get my camera out, Frenchie conceded and walked off down the road. I thought that was very honorable of him, sacrificing for his fellow travelers. So after a quick 2-0 rock, paper, scissors victory by me over the Austrian, I found myself alone on the highway in the desirable position. Even though I was the first hitchhiker the cars would see, I was not able to persuade anyone for a ride. The heat was intense and penetrating. My backpack was digging deep into my shoulders, and I started to question my ability to make it in this heat. But just when I thought I couldn't endure anymore, I met the woman of my dreams. She fed me, gave me a bag of ice, and called for a taxi. And to my surprise, once more, as I was waiting for my taxi, along walked up. I had no idea how he got behind me. By my calculations, he should be at least 2 miles ahead of me, but yet I saw him come from the same direction I just came from. Then it dawned on me. I remembered an hour earlier on the side of the road hearing something in the bushes. At the time, I thought it was just another one of my hallucinations from the heat. The taxi ride back to Jerusalem would cost 400 shekels. I asked Frenchie if he had any money. He did not. After a very long, awkward pause, I got in my taxi and Frenchie started off down the road.
Au carrefour de son amour, c'est le dernier comme toujours. Entre deux misères, il boit un verre.
5 miles down the road, I picked up the Austrian. I could have sold him that bag of ice for $1 million if he had it.
Au carrefour de son amour, c'est le dernier pour toujours.
We were finally on our way back to the city of Jerusalem. Oh yes, and Frenchie too. Here is what I know of Gaza. It is the most densely populated strip of land in the world. Over 1.2 million people inhabit Gaza. 98.7% are Muslim, 0.7% are Christian, and 0.4% are Jewish. Israel controls all water, all agriculture, and the borders into and out of the territory. The areas in blue are reserved for the Jewish settlers only. Less than 0.5% of the population lives on more than 13% of the land. Back at the hostel, I had never experienced exhaustion like this before. It hurt to close my eyes, and it hurt to keep them open. Simple thoughts like how to turn a doorknob took longer to process. I sat and thought about my failed attempt to get into Gaza, about how far I went and not to succeed. I thought about my travel companions and how they must feel. The Austrian, like me, was trying to document the situation in Gaza. But the French doctor, Frenchie, as particular as he was, him being turned around at the border was the real travesty of the day. He was there trying to bring in medicine and medical supplies to a refugee camp in Gaza that had sick and dying but was out of all medical supplies. The disappointment I felt was shallow when compared to the people in need that would have to go without. I needed to find some empirical evidence that would help make sense of all this. At this point, I still had only bits of information. But tomorrow, I would go to Hebron, where that would all change, and I would never be the same. What do you think is going to need to happen for the bombings to stop?
Why gonna be? Kick them out.
Huh?
Kick them out.
Kick them out?
Yes.
Them being...
I think there can be two nations live here.
You don't think there can?
No.
So...
They don't like us, we're not crazy about them, so...
Okay.
That's the truth. It's not popular maybe to say that, but I'm not a politics, so that's the truth, I think.
What do you think is it about them that makes your people not like them so much?
Why we don't like them? Because they kill us.
Yeah?
We need more than this.
On the way to Hebron, our first stop was at refugee camp Arub. At first, the children seemed to be afraid of me. Akka said it might be because of the green khaki shirt I was wearing, too similar to that of the Israeli military. I felt as though I had been transported to a third world country, A foul smell permeated the air, apparent the lack of a functioning sewage system. Children, where in my country it would be mandatory to be in school, mill about with seemingly nothing but time on their hands. After a few minutes, and with reassurance from my companions that I wasn't from the military, the children approached me with some curiosity.
Hello?
Hello!
Soon I found myself leaving behind the van and driving off with the man I was told helped ran the camp. We went to a building still under construction that was being funded by UNICEF. Talk to me about the camp. How many people live here?
عدد سكان المخيم 8000 نسمة. أغلبهم من القرى المهجرة عام 48.
Does the Israeli government ever come through here?
كثير. يوم.
Why do they say they're coming in here? What are they looking for?
الإسرائيليين يوميا بفوتوا يعني وبشكل يومي لسبب أو بدون سبب، سواء في مشاكل أو في شيء مشاكل. حتى لو في شيء مشاكل بدخلوا وهم بيفتعلوا المشاكل.
What do you think will have to happen for peace to exist?
يعني بعتقد إنه الشعب الأمريكي أكثر الشعب بيدرك حقيقة إنه الشعب الفلسطيني بحاجة إلى دولة فلسطينية مستقلة، وعلى لسان الرئيس جورج بوش قبل عام وعد الفلسطينيين بإعطائهم دولة مستقلة. إحنا من حقنا كفلسطينيين إنه نعيش كباقي البشر بدولة مستقلة عاصمتها القدس إلى جانب دولة إسرائيل، مثل ما الإسرائيليين لهم حق بالعيش في دولة، إحنا كباقي شعوب البشر من حقنا أن نعيش دولة مستقلة عاصمتها القدس. الأمريكان أو الشعب الأمريكي للمشكلة يعني للأسف في مشكلة كبيرة جدا، وهي الإعلام الإسرائيلي أو الإعلام الغربي بيحاول يوصف الفلسطينيين دائما بأنهم هم الإرهابيين، وبقول للشعب الأمريكي إنه إحنا لسنا بإرهابيين. قرارات الأمم المتحدة سواء قرار 242 أو قرار 383 وقرار 191 بحق العودة وإقامة الدولة الفلسطينية، كلها قرارات أصدرتها الأمم المتحدة بإجماع إنه أنا من حقي كفلسطيني أنا أعيش كباقي البشر ذات سيادة.
كله بيشوفوش ولا بيشوفوش اللي مش مسكر بس.
We tried for 2 hours to get into Hebron, but every checkpoint had the same outcome.
All roads to Hebron currently closed.
We were able to find some roads into the city that were not guarded by military checkpoints, but those too had been made impassable. Here, Palestinians bring in food, water, and supplies via a crane. I found this puzzling. If the military was establishing a complete lockdown of the city for security purposes, then why were they allowing people to deliver food and supplies unchecked? A man stops to show me his son, wounded. He said he was not allowed to travel past the checkpoint to take him to a hospital.
How did it happen? Why is Hebron closed?
هذا الخليل مسكرة لأنه هم بيدعوا إنه في مشاكل وما فيش إشي، فوين مكان بحطوا تلات.
Do you have family that lives inside of Hebron or?
عندي.
So you can't see them or you
تشوفهم بالمناسبات؟
في المناسبات لما بدنا في الاضطرار، وترى الأوقات في ممنوع التجول يعني معنى التجول.
I wanted to leave the van behind and walk in, Aka told me that was far too dangerous, and we should continue trying to find a road where we could drive in. But after 4 or 5 checkpoints, no luck. Just as I packed away my camera, thinking we would not get in, something happened. My driver, Musa, pulled up to a gate entering the city reserved for Jewish settlers only. Maybe it was my green shirt, I'm not sure. But the man in the guard shack who was reading the newspaper simply looked up and, after seeing me, pushed the button opening the gate and went back to his reading. We were in. It took a while for our driver, Musa, to find his bearings, and soon we found ourselves right on the other side from where we had seen the crane delivering food and supplies earlier. Both Aka and Musa seemed very nervous about something.
What? What's so funny?
If the Israeli they catch us, they've been fuck us. No, I'm serious.
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
To be honest, I would have preferred for him to have kept that to himself. I told myself I would direct us to do everything we could to avoid any encounters with the military, trying to calm my nerves.
This is the Israeli settlement, and there is about 400 Jews they live inside the settlement.
I could tell that Musa, our driver, was becoming more nervous about our being in the city, which was in turn making me more nervous.
Is that a government vehicle just passing us?
I could tell we were now traveling through a Palestinian city due to all the sights that had become far too familiar. I was told that we would be leaving our van behind and walking from here on. Again, we encountered children with seemingly nothing better to do but spend their times hanging out in the streets. We pressed on. But something seemed different about this place. Something was missing. People. I had asked Aka what these cement barricades were for. He had said, "Don't worry, they are nothing." I was now learning that Aka told me this for my own good, because he knew that if I had known what area we were entering, I might have rethought things. For we were now entering Hebron H2, a high-security military zone off limits to all except Jewish settlers. The city is divided into 2 sectors, H1 and H2. H2 was carved out of Hebron when 400 Jewish settlers were moved in by the Israeli government. In place to protect those 400 settlers, 2,500 military personnel. And with that, gone were my hopes of avoiding any encounters with the military.
Okay. Your passport.
Yes, sir.
Moments before this soldier approached us, Aka turned to me and said, with the most serious tone I'd ever seen him use, "Remember your story." We had devised, should we run into the military, a story that I was here as an American Jew on a pilgrimage to take pictures of where my father's family used to live here in Hebron, and that we had been given permission to enter the city for that reason.
Is this where you come from? Where I come from, Los Angeles.
Doing a report or something?
Just checking everything out, seeing how it is.
Our mere presence here would hopefully be enough of a reason to believe the story, since there was such a tight lockdown on the people entering the city. Everything would be fine as long as they didn't try to verify our story with the soldiers at the checkpoints into the city. Even though a second soldier walked up, causing us to explain the entire story again, we were allowed to continue on, and my technique of employing a hidden camera seemed to have worked.
Thank you.
The children we had passed at the barricades seemed to be our cheering team as they threw snipes at the soldiers we had just encountered. Back near the trash heap, of which the stench was nauseating even from a distance, I saw something I didn't understand. Was this Israeli graffiti? I wasn't sure. The only Palestinians I saw outside in H2 was a mother and her child, who were being stopped by the same guards we had encountered moments earlier. We were making our way deeper into H2 towards the mosque. I would try to use my companions as cover as I would try to steady my camera.
Don't move, you guys.
But the frequency of soldiers and checkpoints was making it too difficult.
Go tell them that your father is you.
As I was escorted over to a checkpoint for questioning, I was conflicted about using my heritage as a ploy to get deeper into the military zone. My father's family was not from Hebron, and I do not belong to a Jewish synagogue.
Hello.
But this felt all too similar to a very flawed way of thinking that my country used to practice. So I should feel lucky that I had a way inside. And so far, it was working.
Huh?
Yes, yes. Do you know what he said?
Not much.
These soldiers are from the lost tribe of Africa. They are guarding the entrance to the mosque, a holy place for both Jews and Muslims. Once a mosque for Muslims, it was taken over by the Israeli military a few years ago and given to the settlers. As we made our case for being there, settlers entering the mosque stopped only out of curiosity of these three people that clearly didn't belong here. I was sure that at any moment they would search me, find that I was videotaping everything, and it would be over. But that didn't happen, and we said goodbye to the lost tribe of Africa.
Thank you.
Checkpoints were now every 80 feet, and every time I would approach a new set of guards, I could feel my blood pressure rise. We were not stopped at this checkpoint since it was in clear view of the last checkpoint we had just been released from. As we moved away from the mosque, I began to have that same feeling I had when I first entered the H2 area. Where were all the people? Where had they gone? I could see some people in their houses above, but that couldn't be all the people that at one point were part of a community that used these shops for their daily living. Some 15 to 20,000 people. At our next checkpoint, I saw two men from the TIPH, an international observer organization put in place by Boutros Boutros-Ghali to monitor the Israeli government some years ago.
Andreas. Andreas, nice to meet you. Where are you guys from?
Norway.
Norway. What are you doing here?
TIPH.
Pardon me?
TIPH, National Observers.
National Observers?
Yep.
Very good. And what are you observing?
Well, the same thing as you're filming, I think.
Huh?
Filming the roadmap. You observe the roadmap.
You're observing the roadmap, are you? Very good. How's it coming?
No. Well, it's pretty fucked up.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Any hope?
What? Oh.
For the roadmap?
Not sure about that. I don't know.
Cigarette.
Yes. Yes, I do.
Yeah. You can picture, but only the street.
Only the street?
Very
nice. Not,
not.
So you guys get pretty much, how's your access as far as like observing? Do you really get to observe whatever?
We can go everywhere we like.
Inside the city of we have access to everywhere.
Yeah. So if okay, so everything's...
Unless we have particular areas, small areas called close military areas.
Then those areas change, or are they?
Sometimes it's a pretext for other things.
Other things, yeah. So they might designate other areas, those areas, when needed.
Yeah. When needed, you can always say that, this is a close military area. No one from outside can enter. And basically, whatever you want.
I'll definitely consider. Could you get me the Thank you guys so much. I was concerned that the longer we stayed in one place, the more attention we drew, so we moved on. And as we moved down the street, that feeling that had been in the back of my head, the presence of something that I couldn't put my finger on, hit me hard like a brick wall. I saw the next checkpoint 100 yards away. The soldiers were paying attention to something off in the other direction. I knew I had only a few moments to act, so I gave my camera to Akka and pulled out my still camera, thinking it would be less noticeable from a distance. What I was seeing was making me sick. Everything I had once thought to be reality was crashing down around me. Everything I knew to be right and wrong was staring me in the face. Within these few moments, my life changed completely. By now, the soldiers at the next checkpoint were yelling to me, and it probably didn't help that I hadn't noticed Akka was now holding my video camera like a video camera.
Yes? What'd he say?
He said he's going to shoot.
1,500 Palestinian shops closed down. The Star of David indicates a seal of permanent closure. To ignore and open would be a crime punishable by imprisonment.
It's like a ghost town. Hello, how you guys doing? So how are things going around here?
Yeah, no, not so bad. Sometimes.
Yeah?
Today has been pretty cool. I mean,
yeah, pretty good.
Which is not the case, of course. Which is rare, also.
So this whole city's pretty much shut down because of the settlers?
Pretty much.
Yeah, pretty
400
much.
settlers, is that right?
Sorry?
400? 400 settlers.
Yeah.
And
just here in the city
inside
center.
the city.
There is another settlement just
without counting
up there.
Kiryat Arba.
Yeah, exactly.
So how many people were actually locked down for these 400 settlers?
At least 4,000 in Kiryat Arba.
How about here?
About here 400, yeah. From
No, 400 settlers, but how many locals?
1,000
and 20.
Yeah.
120,000.
Yeah, 120,000.
So 120,000 people can't go outside their houses, pretty much.
Yeah.
It depends if they're
exactly.
Basically here in the H2 area, which is curfew, and of course in H1, like today, some parts of the town are under curfew, others not. So, but we just had an example of 1 hour before, 1 hour ago, and a whole bunch of people wanted to go to a marriage because it was marriage day. So in some part in H1 area, but all the person in the H2 could not leave their house.
Yeah, they lived in H2, so they
because
were
they're
stopped
living in H2 area, so they cannot go to H1 area.
How do these people survive if they're all locked down like this?
That's a good
they
question.
blow up themselves.
Huh?
They go to Jerusalem and they blow up themselves. No, I mean.
Yeah. That's what they do.
Course. We are kidding, but.
I mean, the university has been closed
I couldn't
for
live
10
in this
months.
in this kind of life. I couldn't live.
What does this remind you guys of?
Sorry?
Does this remind you of anything? Historically?
A lot.
Anything you'd like to actually say, or?
A lot. A lot. But you know, there is this psychological, I don't know how to say it in English, which has been analyzed, which is called the symptom of the beaten kid. Like the kid who was been beaten will grow up and will beat their children. Even he was not guilty of being beaten. I mean, he was beaten by the parents. And this child, if there is no like psychological follow-up, he will grow up and then beat his own children because he was beaten, because he just thinks that it's a normal way to do it without any other explanation. And that reminds me also some other things.
What they want.
Maybe she wants to say something.
We should go now. Thank you guys.
All the best.
Take care.
ديروا بالكم يا شباب.
كيف حالك؟ كل شيء تمام؟ Okay, take care. All the best.
Alright.
You know what it is?
وين صارت العملية اللي
How fitting for dogs to have more freedom than the people that have lived here for generations.
See which kind of life these people they got? So because of the people, they don't get hope in the future. When they told you, these people in the West Bank, they don't get hope in the future, because what's going on here, you see by your eyes how the people they live here.
I wanted to say something to these children, something that might help them make sense of all this, but I couldn't think of anything to say. They were having too much fun with my camera, and anything I would say would ruin their moment.
والله بكره بطلع مع التلفزيون والله
عن جد بتستوش انت
بكره لما يطلع مع التلفزيون هيك بتصير تقول لهم بتستاهلوا والله
زي الاسلام امشي يلا امشي زي الاسلام يلا باي
والله انا شفتك على الراجل قول يعطينا اسمه.
Alright, we gotta go. Bye-bye.
I still wanted to know where all the people that were clearly unaccounted for in the H2 district had went. 3 blocks outside H2, I found them, living in something that can only be described as a ghetto. After we passed through the ghetto, the car was silent. No one spoke, not a word. We pulled up to what was the Mukata in Hebron, completely demolished. The courthouse, the police station, and the jail, the town hall, and the Palestinians' government headquarters. I'm sure if you ask the Israeli military why they did this, they would tell you it was necessary because of terrorism. I, however, could only think of one word to describe this, but I dare not speak it. Not yet.
I think that 90% of the Palestinian people are probably very good, honest people. So even if 90% of the people are willing to make peace with Israel, you got 10% of the fanatics who are basically holding the rest of the people at a stranglehold, and they're making it look like it's all Israel's fault, when in reality their own problems, even though Israel has to put some measures to protect itself, which could possibly in some way not be as potentially good for the Palestinians, their own people are hurting themselves more than Israel is, I think.
On the hills behind me, the town of Jenin. And inside Jenin, the refugee camp, the scene of the most intense fighting of Israel's current military offensive. The camp's now been sealed off by the army. International aid agencies can't get in, and they say they now fear the worst. The outside world doesn't yet know exactly what's happened, and for now, there are two conflicting accounts. The Palestinians call it a massacre, a war crime. They say that many hundreds of Palestinians in the camp have been killed, including many civilians. And they accuse the Israeli army of trying to cover up what it's done, of bulldozing the bodies of those killed into mass graves. But Israel's version is very different. It says no massacre, no mass graves, and no cover-up, just a simple mistake, a slip of the tongue about casualty figures. And it says that the attack on Jenin is part of Israel's legitimate war against terror, that fighting has been between Israeli soldiers and Palestinian militants, and that most of the Palestinians killed have been fighters, and that the Israeli army has done all that it can to make sure that innocent Palestinians have not been hurt. And the army says that international relief agencies and diplomats have not been allowed into the refugee camp for their own safety.
Jenin is located just a few miles inside the West Bank. However, crossing into the West Bank can be tricky. You never know what to expect from the soldiers at the checkpoints, and each soldier responds differently, depending on why I tell them I'm here. Today, I'm a photojournalist traveling to the West Bank to take photos of blooming wildflowers for Home and Garden magazine. Across the border into the West Bank, we traveled through what seems like a way station. I felt like I had crossed over into a different world. It should only take us 10 minutes to reach the city of Jenin, just a couple miles past this dirty Palestinian village, where again, young children wander aimlessly. As we left the village, I began to formulate how we would get inside Jenin. There would most definitely be at least one checkpoint into the city, and I had received reports that no one was allowed in or out. Less than a mile from the city limits of Jenin, we came across our first obstacle. The Israeli military had cut a trench across the road leading into the city. We made an attempt to drive around the trench, but it seemed to go on for at least 150 meters in either direction. So we would have to turn around and try a different way back into the city. Talk to me about what happened to your husband and your children.
يوسف أحمد كان نايم.
Her husband had been sleeping.
نايم بالبيت، أجوا فتحوه يعني قاموا الفراش عنه بخوف، كل المسدسات على راسه. وحولوه يعني بخوف ورعاب، يعني حول من النوم مفزوع يعني. الساعة 2:30 بالليل.
It's 2:30 o'clock
بالليل. مع الخوف حول مفزوع كتير كله كلبشوه لابس كلسون. حولوه يعني حتى كلبشوه حطوا وجهه للحيط ولبسوه غمامة سودا يعني أسود طلعوه البيت برا كل الأولاد بالبيت يبكوا يصيحوا عليه قد ما صيحوا كتير حطوا المسدسات في رؤوس الأولاد يعني إنه ارجع بلاش ينسفوا البيت يعني إحنا خفنا كتير 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 واخدوه على وين ما بعرف معرفش وين أخدوه.
We had been traveling for more than 40 minutes before we found a road that cut through the farmland to the west of Jenin. We had to drive slowly or else we would kick up too much dust and draw unnecessary attention to our crossing. But if successful, we could be there in under an hour. We picked up a man walking along the side of the road, also on his way to Jenin. He told us once inside Jenin, he would show us where the refugee camp was and he would take us to people willing to talk about what's been going on in the city. But we would have to reach the city first.
فاتحة جنين.
As we reached a paved road that led into Jenin, the man we had picked up became very frightened as he told us the military had established a defensive position 1 mile down this road, and they had been shooting at anyone who approached them over the last 2 days. I couldn't verify his claim, but nevertheless, I didn't want to find out.
I was born in 1944, still under the mandate, British mandate. So my birth certificate, it's written in 3 languages, Arabic, Hebrew and English. So I was born in Palestine, in fact. I'm Palestinian. The way we should realize, we should treat the problem, the bombing and the problem with Arabs is, maybe it's not nice to compare it, but maybe we should treat it maybe as much as the same way we treat car accident. It's something that is there. Maybe we cannot eliminate it completely, but we can do as much as we can. We should do as much as we can. As much as we can now, as much we can afford, as much we can to eliminate it and to through with this.
تصور هذا على حدود اللي عملوه بين اليوم صار الاحتلال اللي بين الاردن واسرائيل كان عملوا قاطع كان حاجز هذا من هون الاردن ب
48 67 هاي.
ايوه.
Okay, this is the border in 48.
هذا الاردن بودي. طلع حدوده.
Okay, between the Jordanian and the Israeli government.
We were now making our way through the mountains to the north of Jenin. We would travel through the mountains for close to an hour before we would try to cut across towards Jenin. It seemed unreal that an entire city was so cut off from the rest of the world. I wondered what was so dangerous about this place that it should be quarantined from civilization. I was beginning to lose hope of finding those answers.
حالتهم النفسية صعبة، صاروا يفرفروا تحتيهم، بولوا البول تحتيهم، وضع النفسي سيء. صار حالة يعني صاروا عصبيين يضربوا بعضيهم.
Confused all the time.
وضع كتير سيء بشكل يعني الأولاد ضاعوا يعني الأولاد كتير سيئين.
What is your opinion of America?
شو رأيك بأمريكا أنت؟ كيف فكرتك عن أمريكا؟ احكي العادي.
طبيعي عادي يعني أمريكا ما بتحب شعب فلسطيني كائن يعني ما بتحب شعب ما بتحب شعب فلسطيني كدولة يعني ما هي بتحالف مع إسرائيل كدولة إسرائيليين بحبوا بعض أكتر من الشعب الفلسطيني. ما بتحبنا إحنا يعني كشعب فردي ممكن تتعاطف معنا معاطفة بس ما بتحبنا كدولة فلسطينية يعني إننا صار لنا حقوق كدولة ما بتحبنا.
Having successfully made it out of the mountains, we headed for a small town just 1/4 mile from Jenin. As we drove by 2,000-year-old olive trees, it was hard not to realize how old this part of the world is. This small village, like all the others, seemed barely hanging on to existence. We would stop here and try and plan the next leg of our route. We decided to become proactive in our safety. I was told that I would have a much better chance of not being shot at by the military if they thought I was with the news media. I knew Aka was genuinely concerned about our safety, but I still felt he might have gone a little too far with the tape.
What's the hell, Kenzie? What's you take a picture?
Ladies and gentlemen, the great Kemi.
Oh. Today you are in good mood, I think. You are happy. I see you smile alone. I hope all the time you are happy. I can't say nothing, you understand me? I don't want to say bye, nothing. I can't. Where?
Introduce your son. Introduce your son.
Yeah.
On camera. Go say hi to your son.
Hi, Akram. He is a good man, Akram. He is a good man. He is a very good man, Akram. خذ هاي الصفة وراك أكرم. أجو من سوزان.
Talk to me about life.
The life is very bad. The traditions very bad. No business, no tourist. Jerusalem, they want tourists to come, to buy, to make actions in the street, buying, selling.
Why don't you think they come?
They're afraid from bombs, you know.
Yeah?
Yes. They're afraid, but now I hope we have a good peace.
Yeah?
They want to make.
You think it's possible?
We hope to. You see? He's a very hard person, Kenzie. He's a good friend of me.
بالتلفزيون بيجيبك؟
Oh, you take all my jewelry things. Oh, lovely. Lovely, lovely, lovely.
Who's this?
He's son of my brother. I am his uncle.
His uncle?
His name is Ahmad.
Is he a good uncle?
بقول لك أنا عمك منيح قول له آه. قول له yes.
Are you a good uncle? Is he a good uncle? Yeah? He doesn't beat you? Does he beat you with a stick?
بضربك يعني أنا.
No? Are you sure? You can tell me if he does. I won't tell him that I know.
هل أنا بضربك؟ He said no.
Traveling through the hills just outside the city was slow going at best. Passing the occasional taxi loaded with Palestinians told me that we were closer than ever.
فاتحة من هون على جنين؟ فاتحة؟ شو صار؟ على جنين؟ منين كيف ضل طالع من هون؟ كيف ضل طالع؟ كيف ضل انت منين جيت انت؟ انا جيت في طريق الكفاف يعني الدباب الجديد الجنوب بين الزيتون. قال لي ارجع، انا قال لي ارجع في طريق المهم نفس جنين يعني المهم انه نكونوا في جنين. في مشكلة؟ قلب جنين؟ لا. بس في دبابة بين الزيتون في مشاة. هسه هون قدامنا يعني فيه؟ في دبابة جوا. لأن نمره كان
I didn't speak Arabic, so I didn't know they were talking about a tank down the road, and Aka must have forgotten to mention it to me.
كيف الوضع؟ وضع؟ والله مأساوي يعني كيف؟ في شيء تحت؟ روح طلع. ايش تروح؟ بدلك كيف؟ صانع بدك تمرق عن الدبابة معك حصانة غير ولا؟ اي حصانة دبلوماسية.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
شوي عيب شوي
دكتور نصير.
ايه؟
دكتور.
The more I live near them, and I know many of them personally, I have friends, but I realize that something in Islam, something that Muslim is not fit to the 21st century. It's just they have no problem killing each other. Whenever, if you look around, all the conflict in the world, you see that whenever there's a conflict, some Arab or Muslim involved. Something in this religion is
violent.
Violent, of course, but evil.
We had finally reached our destination, Jenin. These taxis and cars are leaving Jenin through the only way out, an embankment that leads down to a dry riverbed below. By doing so, they were avoiding the tank just to the west of us, out of our sight. Huh?
The tank is here.
The tank?
It's there to the west.
Where is?
Yeah, you can't see.
As long as our van could make it up the embankment, we would be able to get into the city while avoiding the tank.
بابا قلنا لابا تعال هون
I told the commander of the tank that I'd been given permission to enter the West Bank to cover the story of Islamic militants being suppressed by the military in Jenin. I, at this point in my trip, felt comfortable that if you can make one soldier believe your story, you're 90% there. And I knew he wouldn't buy my ruse that I was there to photograph flowers, so I claimed that of one well-known network news station. And in perfect form, it worked. We would finally have access to Jenin. Stop. Immediately on entering the city, there were visible scars from gunfights as many buildings were riddled with bullet holes. Is Hamas and Jihad in this town?
كل أجهزة من جميع الفصائل من جميع الأجهزة موجود. هذا وين ما كان يعني هذا اللي موجود.
Throughout the city, more than 90% of the shops were closed down, although I was surprised to see some luxury cars cruising the streets.
في شباب هون تيجي بعض الشباب هون ما تيجي مسلح بوقت كل اجتياح بيجوا بينزلوا هون هسه بيعملوا جميل لما يرفعوا تجول بدك ينزلوا يشوفوا فقاموا في واحد من الشباب انتبهوا انه في جيش فقاموا جابوا من المجيات وبلش فيهم اصلا جنبه سوا.
Are you part of what the Israeli government considers a terrorist organization?
احنا لا مش منظمة إرهابية، احنا ناس بنطالب بحقوقنا وبنطالب بأوطاننا وبنطالب بأمان وسلام.
What do you think it's going to take for there to finally be peace here?
والله إن ظلت الحالة بهذا الشكل مش معقول يصير سلام. لأنه كل إنسان بده يأخذ حقه، لأنه الجيش الإسرائيلي بيكون باغتيالات كل يوم بنطلع على التلفزيون في ناس بأطفال ونساء وشيوخ وناس بالشوارع بيموتوا من الطائرات ولا فكل فعل ردة فعل.
This is what's left of the Mukata in Jenin. The courthouse, the jail,
the police station, and yes, the Palestinian Authority.
There is no authority now inside here.
Even dogs apparently have it better in Hebron than here. We stopped at the house belonging to the man we had given a ride to. From in front of his house, I could see the road that we first attempted to make our crossing into the city from, but had been turned around by the trench in the road some 4.5 hours earlier.
Do you condemn or condone the recent bombings in Jerusalem?
احنا بنستنكر كل شخص عادي بتضرر.
هم الثانيين بضربوا اشخاص عاديين وبضربوا اطفال وبضربوا نساء وبضربوا شيوخ وهدوا البيوت على رؤوس اصحابهم في الجرافات في الدبابات وهم يضربوهم في الطيارات. شو كانوا عاملين الثانيين؟ شو كانوا عاملين؟ وعلى اي اساس هم قاعدين بيقتلوا فينا واحنا ارهابيين؟ وهم مش ارهابيين اللي بيهدوا البيوت على رؤوس اصحابها، اللي بيشتتوا 26 طفل. احنا بنحب السلام وبنحب الامان وبنحب اولادنا كمان يعيشوا في امان في سلام في اطمئنان وفي بيوتهم وياخذوا حريتهم كمان. ما بنحب اذا بيطلع الولد ما تامنش عليه انه يرجع عليك.
زي هذا قولي له هذا صغير
هذا كان عمره 12 سنة 12 سنة كانوا يلعبوا هون فوق اجت قذيفة اجت في صدره.
خليه يترجم له.
شايف 12 سنة كان عمره.
What happened to you?
ما حدا اجى قدم على الدبابات، اجت الدبابة وقفت هون فوق على الشارع، شافتنا قاعدين نلعب ضربت صاروخ علينا.
ما بيقولوا عن حالهم ارهابيين بس احنا ارهابيين، احنا صاحبين حق بندافع عن بيوتنا بندافع عن مالنا وعن اراضينا الموجودة من سنة 48.
This huge vacant lot used to be an apartment complex for over 400 families, until the Israeli military learned that a leader from Hamas was living here, at which time the Israeli military brought the bulldozers in. The smoke from this small pile of burning rubber is choking. However, these children didn't seem to mind.
I couldn't believe people could live like this. I couldn't believe people were forced to live like this. Everywhere I went, around every corner and on every street, I saw the same thing.
Ooh.
كمواطنة فلسطينية يعني بحب أحرر أول إشي نحرر شعبي. الشعب الفلسطيني كتير يعني عايش بوضع سيء. الأطفال ما لهمش يعني مش بعبروش عن حريتهم أول شيء. الأطفال لا لهم بيوت، لا لهم وطن، لا لهم هوية، يعني هويتهم خسرانين نهائيا. نفسي كل لهم دولة مستقلة زي أمريكا، زي ألمانيا، زي إسرائيل، زي بقية دول العالم، زي الدول المانحة، زي السعودية، زي مصر، زي أي دولة يعبر عن شعبه. شعب نعبر عن رأيه للشعب العالم، كيف هم عايشين أطفالهم، ماخذين حريتهم، ماخذين كوضعهم السياسي. الطفل بيعبر عن حريته. عندنا هون لا، ولا طفل على دولة فلسطينية بعبر عن رأيه، يعني محروم من الطفولة، محروم من يعبر عن شخصه ذاته. بدي نفسي زي أطفالنا يعيشوا زي أطفال العالم، زي أطفال إسرائيل. ناشونال أمريكا وألمانيا إيطاليا بريطانيا لا، بس أطفالنا لازم يعيشوا زي أطفال إسرائيل، بس ياخدوا حريتهم زيهم، يعبر عن شخصه يعني شخصيته الطفل. هذا شو دربك؟ فتحت بين المواجع اللي عندي هنا. فتحت المواجع يا علا، الله ما يصدق بس.
Do you think peace is possible here?
I really don't think peace is possible here.
Really?
Yeah, I lost hope. I think I lost hope.
What would it take for the bombings to stop?
I think we're gonna have to sacrifice a lot, and they're gonna have to sacrifice a lot. But it's gonna take time for us to actually to accept the fact that we're gonna have to do something about it, because we're blaming them. They're blaming us. We're gonna have to say this is not our fault or their fault. We're gonna have to think about a solution, what to do, and actually do it.
Peace, if it's possible, I don't think it's possible right now. I think in our generation it's not quite possible, because it's our fault, it's also their fault. It's both of us guilty. So I believe it has to be, I think the solution is in education. We have to educate our children instead of hating to understand the other side. If we want peace, I think we should give up things. So they should give up things that we could make peace with them.
We needed to leave the West Bank before dark, before the military sealed the borders. First, we would have to leave the city of Jenin. To my surprise, the soldiers at the checkpoint out of Jenin were quite friendly.
Hello, America.
Very good.
They were happy to let me take out my cameras when they found out I was from the American news media. Not one of them was over 24.
What a nice bunch of guys. My time here had ended. The next morning, Musa drove me to the airport. I was in awe that along the side of the freeway, I could see the ruins of a long ago civilization that still remained. I saw 2,000-year-old olive trees and tombstones marking where soldiers fell during a battle from a previous war. I saw more military stations and still had to pass through checkpoints to the very end. At a stoplight, one of the most amazing things happened. A bus pulled up next to us and the driver started talking to both Musa and me. It was Musa's uncle. He is a driver for a Jewish charter bus and had obviously talked to Musa throughout the week about the adventures Musa and I had taken together. He looked at me and said, "Please tell your people all we want is peace. We just want to live in peace." And then the light changed. As I boarded the plane, I was trying desperately to make sense out of everything I had seen. Would people care, or would people label me an anti-Semite? Back home, I would try to get my life back to normal and wondered how much time that would take. After all, I am an American, and that's what we do best, get back to normal. It took many days before I truly made sense from it all. And you might be asking me, what does all this mean? Do I think that justifies this? Or do I think this justifies that? I believe the answer lies inside the question. Mankind has a funny way of dealing with the things of this nature. Maybe it's just easier for us to deal with them after we're no longer responsible for them. Perhaps we find it easier to let the future deal with the problems we create than for us to deal with them when they happen. Could it be we are too afraid of asking ourselves the questions that will give us the answers? I said earlier that I could only think of one word to describe what I was seeing here. That word, systematic. Systematic, as defined in the dictionary, purposefully regular, methodical, carried on using step-by-step procedures. Mukata, Ramallah. Mukata, Hebron. Mukata, Jenin. To answer the question, nothing justifies this. And if you agree with me on that, then tell me, what justifies this, or this, or this? And I ask you this question, which child suffers more, this child or this one? This child will know she's suffering. She'll know because people will surround her and give her comfort and tell her things will be all right. She'll go to the hospital where the doctors will show her love as they begin her life-saving surgery. People will care for her. Psychologists will be there to explain what happened to her parents. People will teach her to walk again and help her in her healing process. This child won't know she's suffering. She'll grow to think it's normal. He'll become used to it. They will eventually think it's how things are. It won't shock them when their house is destroyed or his parents don't come home again. And she'll think it's normal when she straps a bomb to her chest and walks into a Jewish nightclub and kills herself and 24 others with her. Her death will be her healing process, completing the circle and starting a new one.
So I ask you, is terrorism the McCarthyism of our time? Is justice truly blind? Is it correlation or causation? Do we care? Do you really want to know? Make up your own mind.